Our next speaker is Dr. Natasha Radhakrishnan, who's going to detail us on B-scan and its relevance. She's a clinical additional professor, Department of Vitreoretina Surgery from Amrita Group Hospitals. And let's hear what she says.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, AIOS ARC, for this opportunity. So today we are going to see how to read an ultrasound B scan. You know that B scan is an important adjuvant for our clinical assessment of various ocular and orbital diseases. When do we do a B scan? We do it usually when retinal examination is not possible, either due to edema or corneal opacities, hyphema, a lot of conditions, dense cataract, where you cannot see the retina. You can also do it sometimes in visible conditions, like for tumors of the eye, ciliary body detachments, to distinguish between RRD and exudative RD, and a lot of other conditions. Now, you need to know a little bit about the physics. So before you interpret it, that is, the high frequency sound waves are transmitted from a probe into the eye. The sound waves strike the structures, and that is reflected back into the probe, converted into an electrical signal, and this is reconstructed as an image on a monitor, which can be used to make a dynamic evaluation of the eye. In ophthalmic ultrasound, we use high frequency short wavelength ultrasound that gives you higher resolution of the minute ocular and orbital structure as compared to the low frequency of an abdominal ultrasound. The B-scan probe frequency is around 10 megahertz, while we have an advanced B-scan now about 20 to 25 megahertz that will penetrate only 5 to 10 millimeters. Now, what is the image that we see? It is called an echo. It is the sound that is reflected from the interface between two media when sound travels from one media to another of different density. And the greater the density difference, the higher the reflectivity. In a B-scan, the oscillating sound beam is passing through the eye and imaging a slice of tissue. So the echoes of which are represented as a multitude of dots that come together to form an image. And the stronger the echo, the brighter the dot. Another word that you should know is gain. When gain is high, weaker signals are displayed, and when gain is low, the weaker signals will disappear. So high gain is equal to low resolution, so you will see weaker signals also. Now, this is the probe that is used, and it has a marker which will denote the position of that, and it is the marker, the area that is marked will be seen at the top part of the of the echogram. Now, there are three probe positions you should know before you interpret it: transverse, longitudinal, and axial. This is the position of the transverse scan, where it will be parallel to the limbus with the pointer either towards the superior area or towards the nasal side. And the longitudinal scan where it is perpendicular to the limbus, and it is kept with the probe marker towards the center of the cornea. It gives you the anteroposterior extent of the lesion. And you should also know about the longitudinal macular scan, in which you direct the patient's gaze temporally, place the probe on the nasal sclera with the marker oriented towards the limbus. This is a horizontal scan of the macula, and it will be seen like this. That is the probe position on top, and in the bottom is your macular scan, where the optic nerve comes in the bottom half of the scan, and the macula will be just above. Now, in a description of a lesion, you need to know the location in relation to easily demonstrable landmarks. You should tell about the extent, anteroposterior and lateral, the dimensions in case of tumors and other solid lesions, shape and configuration, whether it is point-like, membrane-like, or mass-like, internal reflectivity and surface reflectivity of the particular lesion, the structure, whether it is solid or cystic, and a degree of sound attenuation, if any. You should also include mobility, whether it which includes the movement of a live intravitreal organ or after movement such as that is seen with the PVD. Now we will look at how each one can be interpreted in detail. The artifacts that also should be recognized: reverberation artifacts occur when there is a highly reflective surface, which are often seen, especially if the amount of gel that you're using is not enough. You can also get ring down or comet tail artifacts with air bubbles or metal inside the eye. Now, how to read? So there are three types of echoes: dot-like echoes, membranous echoes, and tumors. The dot-like echoes, common thing that we see is asteroid hyalosis. You can see bright point echoes inside the vitreous, that is with a lucid area between the echoes and the posterior part of the eye. And that is the asteroid hyalosis with 100% reflectivity from the echoes. Now, the A scan vector at the bottom of the B scan will give you an idea about the reflectivity of the structures in comparison with the retina and sclera, which gives you the highest 100% reflectivity. So every time you should have the A scan vector also underneath, which will give you an idea about how reflective is that structure. Now, vitreous hemorrhage, fresh vitreous hemorrhage has very low reflective or echolucent, and they may need higher gain for detection. However, organized vitreous hemorrhage will give you membranes of varying reflectivity, and they are usually more denser inferiorly. So this you can see there, as compared to an asteroid hyalosis, the vitreous echoes are very low reflective, and you can see some of them are membranous in the lower half of the scans, where you can see that there are membranous echoes because of long-standing vitreous hemorrhage. In endophthalmitis, you're having inflammation in the vitreous cavity. You can get dot-like low reflective echoes, or you can get cobweb-like echoes. And sometimes thick, high reflective membrane-like echoes may be seen. And the associated features may be a choroidal detachment, retinochoroidal thickening will be marked, and sometimes scleral thickening and orbital inflammation if it has gone in for panophthalmitis. This is a endophthalmitis B scan. You can see the thick membranous echoes inside, as well as the retinochoroidal thickening, and the black arrow points to some fluid outside the sclera as well. Membrane-like echoes are the next things that you should look for. So you can get membranous echoes in posterior vitreous detachment, retinal detachment, choroidal detachment. Now, how do we differentiate these? Posterior vitreous detachment is seen as a freely mobile membranous echo, and high after movements will be seen. After movements means after the eye has stopped moving, the membrane will still be moving. That is after movements. High after movements, low reflectivity. So here you can see the PVD. You can see the corresponding A scan is extremely low reflective, and you will see after movements also. In rhegmatogenous retinal detachment, it will be a thin continuous membrane which is attached to the optic nerve. It will show 100% reflectivity, and moderate after movements if it is a fresh RRD, and no after movements if there is PVR or it is a long-standing RD. Here you can see it is much thicker than the PVD. You can see there is attachment to the optic nerve, and if you see the A scan vector, which is shown by that white arrow down, you can see that it is having a 100% spike of a retinal detachment. Traction retinal detachment seen as concave membranes with varying extent of vitreous and retinal adhesion, with minimal to no after movements will be seen. Exudative detachment, presence of a smooth bullae and shifting fluid. Sometimes you will get echoes inside because of the subretinal fluid being exudates, and you will also be able to demonstrate the changed head position. Choroidal detachment, dome-shaped elevation with a smooth surface with no after movements at all. The serous will be clear inside, and you can get kissing choroidals, and hemorrhagic will have echoes inside. Intraocular foreign body is another important thing that we use the ultrasound B scan for. It gives even better resolution than the CT, and it will be seen as echo-dense signal with shadowing persistence of signal. Posterior T sign, you can see it in the arrow there. You will be able to see fluid there. Common ocular tumors can be differentiated: melanoma, carcinoma, hemangioma. In a melanoma, you will find the collar button shape, acoustic shadowing behind, and you will see choroidal excavation. In a retinoblastoma, you will see calcification that will give you a 100% A scan spike. In an osteoma, because of the the shadowing behind, you will get a double optic nerve sign. In choroidal metastasis, the inside will be homogeneously hyper-reflective. Sometimes you get rare things like ocular cysticercus. Here you can see the scolex can be demonstrated, the cyst can be demonstrated inside in an ultrasound B scan. To summarize, when interpreting a B scan, one should be aware of probe position and gain setting. A scan spike in the display should be on for additional information. The location, extent, dimensions, shape and configuration, reflectivity, mobility and sound attenuation are the characteristics to be looked at. And it's an important tool in our diagnostic armamentarium and should be used when required, and findings should be read in conjunction with clinical examination findings. Thank you all for your patient hearing.
Thank you very much, Natasha. I think you covered every possible question which could be asked to a postgraduate. Something I think which you already said, how do you differentiate an asteroid hyalosis from a vitreous hemorrhage? The postgraduate is asked. One single sentence.
Yeah, the distribution of the asteroid hyalosis will be in the center of the vitreous with a lucid zone between the vitreous and the retina. And in vitreous hemorrhage, it will be more unevenly distributed and more towards the lower part, and there will be no lucid zone. And if you pass a spike exactly through if you pass that vector exactly through the asteroid hyalosis, you will get 100% spike because of the content of the asteroid hyalosis.
Thank you, Natasha, madam. I think you have covered most of the points which the postgraduate needs to know, and you have covered the varied disease as well. So I would quickly move on to our next moderator, Dr. Guruprasad, sir. Your quick comments on the postgraduates about this B-scan and a few tips from you, please.
Yeah, I just want to add that B-scan is a very important tool. She's already told that it has to be always read in conjunction with the clinical findings. And one more thing that we need to stress upon for the postgraduate students, that it is a kinetic examination. It's not a static examination. It's not just like OCT, just like FFA, like you want to have different sections in the OCT and different phases in the FFA. You need to have movements with the B-scan should be spread over the movement of the eye, meaning you should have the mobility. She did mention mobility, but then I think it is better to use the word kinetic examination to impress upon the postgraduate students. One thing, I think there was a slip of the tongue when she said in METS it will be homogeneous. I think it is heterogeneous in the METS. The internal reflectivity in METS in a choroidal tumor, which is a MET, will usually be heterogeneous rather than homogeneous. Homogeneous, it will be more in hemangiomas with a high internal reflectivity, and sometimes pulsations can be seen. Whereas in METS, it will usually be heterogeneous because there will be different areas of different densities within the tumor with liquefaction, necrosis, and solid areas within the METS, which gives this heterogeneous appearance. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Guru, sir. Jatinder, sir, quick comments, and we move on to our next presenter, Dr. Praveen Murli.
Nothing specific. Most of the things were well covered in a very nice presentation. Only thing, just to reiterate again, don't jump to a diagnosis just by seeing the scan. Just label them as the findings, as what you see, and be very clear that you mention as hyper-echogenicity and not mistakenly label them as hyper-reflective. Most people in exams, because of the stress factor, they may just jump on hyper-reflective. That's because that's a more commonly used term. So, but when you're using describing terms on ultrasound, use echo, hyper, and hypoechogenicity rather than the reflective. That's it.